So again, welcome. Like I said, tonight we're going to have a dialogue about dying the undying death. And it can feel like, or sound like, a rather heavy topic. Dying, death. In our culture, we pretend that doesn't even exist. It's an unfortunate consequence of life that we prefer not to pay attention to until we're confronted by it. Either in the impending loss of someone that we care for, or when we just reach a place where we ourselves go, uh-oh. It's very heavy. It's very heavy. What's so interesting is in that in our culture, we celebrate birth and we mourn death. And yet if we looked at how the Buddha described the nature of our experience, that life is suffering, shouldn't it be the reverse? Should we not mourn birth and celebrate death? Oh, my goodness. I'm so sorry you had to come into this. I mean, it's going to have its good moments. It's going to have its difficult moments. There's going to be sickness, and there's going to be aging, and there's going to be death. You're going to have to pay taxes, and you're going to have to deal with traffic tickets, and some days you might not have enough food to eat. But, welcome. Welcome. Now, of course, this isn't to say that life itself is suffering. That's not really true. Right? It's the nature of our relationship with life that becomes our experience of it. And for many of us, when we are absent the understanding of what we are, who and what we truly are, we are embracing life from that perspective of, why is it all so crappy? Why is the world this nightmare that I simply seem to have no choice but to engage? There's so much nonsense and so much difficulty and so many challenges. Yay, I got to watch a sunset, but then I went and somebody had put a ticket on my car. It's like there's never an end. There's never an end to all these little difficulties. And when death comes, isn't it interesting how we immediately go, oh wait, I don't want to go. We dig in our heels, we go, I don't want to go. Wait, just one more. One more what? One more what? It's lovely. It's beautiful how the mind can work with such things. How the mind can play with such things. How it can toy with such things. How attached we become to our experience of life, even when it's shitty. So, there are a couple of different ways that we can approach this subject, right? There are a couple of different perspectives we can take on it. One perspective is, all right, how do I make my life better and prolong it so that I don't have to face death? And the other is, how can I use the inevitability of my own death in this moment to become fully alive? That's the other option. That's the more powerful and more meaningful option. Because it's going to get us someday. It's going to get us someday. Great fear arises with the idea of death. Not just the idea of our own death, but the idea of losing those we care for, those that we love. I'm going to clue you into something, though, right? Share something very important about this notion of death. And that is, it isn't real. It isn't real. Neither is birth. Neither is birth. Rather, when we let go of the egoic conception of self, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but when we let go of the egoic conceptual self, when we see ourselves as we truly are, what we understand at a deep level of inner knowing is that we are a ripple within a field of awareness. a ripple, a wave moving across the sea of consciousness that exists just beneath our doubting minds. That we arise and fall away within this sea. The experience of consciousness is a localized phenomenon. It's a localized phenomenon. It's attachment to sense perception that gives rise to the conceptual self. When we're no longer attached to the conceptual self, when we can see through that and we can see the sea, when we can recognize that this localized experience of consciousness, this localized experience of awareness is part of something far greater, that there's so much more to it. So much more to it. That what you experience as birth and life and death is just a cycle that is occurring within the field of awareness. That the field is the only thing that's real, not the one being born, not the one living, not the one dying. That field is what gives rise to us. We occur within it, and we fall back into it, all without ever having gone anywhere to begin with. There's nothing happening. There's no one here, and there's nothing happening. It's all just awareness playing with itself, all consciousness moving itself in the direction of its own purpose. That which is never born can never die. There's no beginning to any of it, and there's no end to any of it. The problem is the egoic conceptual self wants to own the experience, wants to claim it as I, me, mine. And the fear of death is that egoic expression of consciousness expressing its I, me, mine, claiming the experience and not wanting to let go of it. It says, no, more me, more me. But it isn't real. And that's the joke. This cosmic joke that the thing that we fear most of us, and not everybody fears death, some people are like, hey, bring it on. But for most of us, there's some sense of, oh, when I fall away, what happens next? Oh, what's it all going to be about? What happens? Did I live a good life? Am I going to go to the right place? We start to have that kind of stuff. But none of that is real. The only thing that's real is the present moment. And when we're done being in the present moment, we're still in the present moment. It's no longer in form. It's no longer in form. The movement of form is just a ripple within that sea of conscious awareness. It's just a ripple. It's just a movement. And it didn't start anywhere. It doesn't end anywhere. It just keeps moving. It just keeps moving. The ego death is often expressed as the first death. That moment at which we're able to see through the illusory nature of the conceptual self. And to call it ego death, it's not quite right. It's not quite accurate. Because what you're really trying to do is slay an elephant by means of paper cuts. It's the truth. The ego you don't just wake up one morning and go, I see it all clearly, poof, and the whole thing disappears. It does, sort of, for a little while. Maybe, maybe not. We talked about traps in the past session. To say it's one way or another, or to build a conceptual model of what to expect, is a trap. And so we need to avoid those kinds of things. But this understanding that when the concept of self is truly seen through and the whole thing falls away, it just falls away. It might be for a moment. It might be just the aperture opens for just a brief moment. Oh, what was that? Like a flash, like lightning striking. Oh, what was that? I saw myself nowhere. There was no, wow. There's just awareness of awareness and there's no one in it. What an amazing experience. Or it can be prolonged. It can be something that lasts for hours, or days, or weeks, or months. Or maybe it never falls away again. regardless of how long it lasts, once you've had that moment of insight, that recognition of the truth within yourself. I was speaking to someone the other night about you can carry that experience. Don't hold on to the experience because that's the past. And if you try to hold on to an experience and say, well, that was awakening, I want that, you're in a trap. Much better to hold it like a teddy bear. To hold the memory of it in your arms gently like a teddy bear and use it whenever you feel like, wow, I'm having a really tough day. I'm having a really tough moment. I'm in difficulty. I need something to hold on to so that I can remind myself of what is real and what is not real. And you can reach into memory and pull that experience forward and say, that was real and I know it was real. And because I know that that was real, I know that there's nothing really here for me to be concerned with. That it's just thought. That I'm caught in the movement of thought. And if I can just quiet the mind, it'll all be all right. And even if I can't quiet the mind, it's still all right. It's just the mind doing what the mind does. Its incessant need to define itself. And when this moment occurs, when we have this moment, however it comes and for however long it lasts, eventually something comes to the surface. Something else comes to the surface. Because this idea that the ego just goes all the way at once, you have to understand, for most of us, we've gone through years and years and years of collecting conditioned patterns of thinking and conditioned patterns of behavior. And these grooves run very deep within the mind. And so when you awaken, it's very much as if the experience of awakening, this experience of the ego falling, of the self falling away, it's very much like you're being given a preview. You're being shown what it really is. But you have to understand that there's still work to do. So the ego doesn't just necessarily die. So to say it's an ego death, it's not quite accurate. At a certain point, we begin to realize that the ego itself was never really real either. Whole different conversation. But we begin to recognize that the ego is a tool serving the purpose of the divine. And it melts away into the waters of pure being. That's that place where I talk often about how whether you're conscious or unconscious of what you're doing in any given moment, it's all okay because you are being used as an instrument of the divine to serve its purpose. The idea that you're doing it wrong is just you thinking you're doing it wrong. You're getting in your own way, but that too is perfect. That too is happening within the experience of being. That too is occurring within the field of awareness. That too is guided by consciousness itself. So dying the ego death has this period where I've talked in the past about it's a mourning period. It's a mourning period. It's like, oh, I saw it all fall away, and I don't know what to do now. Well, eventually you're given something else to do, right? So that you don't have to worry. You'll always be given what you need next. It's not like it's all just going to be magical. Whoa, look. But it clears a space. It clears a space in which we can see ourselves as we truly are. There's that glimmer of recognition that some truth has been tapped into. That the truth of our being has been experienced somehow. A lot of it has to do with the movement of awareness. The movement of awareness. If I say, bring your attention to the experience of breathing as the air moves in and out of the nasal passages, and you bring your attention, your awareness to that movement, that awareness, that's what shifts and moves. That's what you can redirect. That's what you are. You are that awareness. You're the space within which everything else occurs, including birth and life and death. Within our conceptual reality, conceptual self, the conceptual world, life as we think it is. At the very least, we can sense the truth of that awareness, that ability to move awareness around, to watch it move. Watch it move over here and over here and over here. In the Buddhist tradition, we talked in the past, right, about how, we've got the 5 sense perceptions, but then there's at least one more, depends on who you talk to, but at least one more. Awareness, mind, whatever you want to define it as. There's at least one more stacked on top of those 5 sensory perceptions. That is the space within which sensory perception occurs. So what's interesting is this understanding that when it all falls away, when you see through the illusion of self, when you see, look, it's words and thoughts, it's words, concepts, and ideas. It's all of the ways in which I am currently defining myself, identifying myself, explaining myself, telling stories about myself. That's what's getting me in trouble. That's my problem. That's my challenge. It's all in thought. Thought isn't real. It only has the weight that I give it. And you let that whole thing go. And poof. Now you have the experience of this is inclusive of everything. It is inclusive of everything. When you look at a human being, you're not just seeing a human being. You're seeing gravity and air. You're seeing all the different constituent parts that allow the human being to be in that space. Everything is connected to everything else in every way, and you're the whole thing because you are the spaciousness within which it all occurs. You are the awareness that gives rise to the whole thing. That's what you are behind the illusion of the conceptual self. And if you touch that, and if you see that, and if you know that within your own experience of being, what dies? Was there ever anything there to begin with? You begin to see the ego itself is a figment of creation. It is, when I was 5 years old, I had this experience. Whoop, that became a blip. And then I had this experience, and that became a blip. And I had this experience. And all these things gave rise and gave shape to my egoic concept of self. But that wasn't born. That concept of self was never born. It gradually grew over time. It became the occlusion, the speck in the eye that prevents us from seeing ourselves as we truly are. That's what gets us, that's us getting in our own way. So when all that falls away and you go, whoa, wow. The ego death, again, in whatever shape it takes, whatever form it takes, for as long as it may last, as much as it may be a roller coaster ride, up and down, and never really quite dies out. It just becomes the small voice that holds no sway because you've seen through its illusory nature, and you can be fully present in, now this, now this, now this. I'm having a difficult day, I'm having a good day. This moment over here sucks, this moment over here is great, but you're holding it all in the same way, in the same balance, with the same understanding that this is the movement, this is the harmony, this is the direction of things, and this is how my role is being played here now. You know that, and you can hold that in spacious awareness, and so you're no longer connected or caught in it. That's the true nature of ego death. It's not that the ego itself dies, it's that you have the spaciousness of being within which to experience the self from a whole different perspective, from a whole different viewpoint. Now, take all these things and we start to really think about them, really put some shine on them. If we can get to that place where there's no one here, there's just the presence of being, moving in the direction of its own purpose. There's just that. This is empty of self. Then so is that. So is this one, and so is that one, and so are these ones. now the world takes on a whole different meaning. You're a ripple within the field of awareness, and so is everyone else. You are playing your part, and so is everyone else. Now where's your judgment? Where's your judging mind that says, well, this person no, and this person yes? Everyone's just doing their part. Which we take into that deeper place where we start to talk about the nature of loss. The nature of loss. And when we find the people in our lives falling away, a much better way of expressing it than to say dying. There's no death occurring. There's a falling away that's occurring. A falling away of the bodily form. Falling away of the bodily form. And that which occupied the form didn't go anywhere. That which occupied the form is still there because it is the awareness that animates and moves all things. Where did it go? It went nowhere. You're it, it's you, it's them, it's all one. Whether it's active or inactive is irrelevant. It's there. It's a field that doesn't move, it doesn't go anywhere. It's always present. We're all facets of the same gem. All facets of the same gem. It's the gem. That's what's real. The facet is that which reflects. It's that which allows the expression, the manifestation of being. If we can use the life that we have as a way to examine the concept of self and see through the concept of self, then what power does death have over us then? Now, many people like to get caught. Jesus is a wonderful figure, right, within many mystical traditions, and you know, many of us are familiar with many of the stories that were there. But, you know, when I look at it from the perspective of a human man, a human being who had the experience of understanding, who truly reached into that place, many Indian mystics, many Sufi mystics, many Gnostic mystics have reached into the same place. All awakened beings are touching the same thing. And people will say, well, he went to his death. For him, it was like, I guess we're going this way. It wasn't a big deal. Yeah, he probably bled, you know, he probably had that moment of sweating blood in the garden the night before, whatever. Sure. Whoa, this is going to be a rough one, boss. I'm in it. I mean, I don't really have a choice. Here we go, you know. But to think about it as if there was someone there who was giving up a sacrifice is a completely misguided notion of what was occurring. To recognize that it was just, all right, now this. Oh, we're going to, oh, wow, oh, that's not comfortable. You know, I mean, it's just being so fully present in the experience of it all. Recognizing that there's no one in it. What power does death have over us when we know at the deepest core of our being that the whole thing is an illusion? Bring some humor into it. So today, as I started watching Star Trek Next Generation again, to occupy my time sometimes, I have a little bit of downtime. And today I was watching one of the episodes in the first season, and it's the first time that Captain Picard is experiencing the new holodeck. And he's in there, and he's like all excited. He's giddy like a little kid coming out of it. He's telling everybody, it's all so real. It's all so real. It's incredible. I thought, you know, she kissed me and it was real. That's what this is. It's not to say that's a story, right? To say, oh, it's a holodeck, we're all in the Matrix. That kind of, those are stories. Those are stories. And I've said many times, any story we tell ourselves is going to lead us into a trap. But to be able to approach life from that perspective, I am a member of the crew of the Enterprise, and I'm on the holodeck, and everything I'm experiencing is happening in safe mode. Nothing real can happen here. To hold that perspective. Oh, look. What power does death have over us when we see the truth of these things within our own experience of being? And what power does it have when we watch others falling away? It's really interesting. You know, I've talked before, we did a whole segment on synchronicity. Synchronicity is a very significant part of my life. Last night, I was watching the video segment on synchronicity because I had given a copy of it to somebody. I'm like, I want to refresh myself, remember, in case you ask questions. While I'm sitting there watching the video on synchronicity, thinking about how it would apply to a discussion on the nature of death, I got a text from my little brother to let me know that my grandfather died. What a wonderful and beautiful synchronicity. Now, isn't it interesting how one of the first reactions within the experience of being is that one that goes, oh, that's so sad. After everything I've already said. The reality of it all being something that every single one of us goes, yeah, that, all right. But still the mind, its first reaction is, oh, that's so sad. Why? You know, I've told my family and the people who care for me, I'm like, when I go, boy, oh boy, I want you to be happy because I'm done. I'm on the other side of the thing looking down going, woohoo, it's over. It doesn't mean that I'm chasing death. It just means that I'm waiting for it like an old friend. When it comes, wonderful. Celebrate. Don't get caught in mourning. Don't get caught in loss. That's about you. When we have someone in our lives who is falling away, or we have lost someone in our lives, and we're reacting to that whole thing with that sense of loss, that sense of, oh, what is my life going to be now that they're gone? That's us. That's the egoic attachment. That's the idea of something being lost, but there's nothing being lost. What we should be focusing on is the celebration of all that was gained in the experience of that being. All of the lessons that we were offered, all of the opportunities that were shared. And if we're thinking even more wisely and we're more in tune with the truth of our being, to let all of that go as well. And to allow the presence of that being to just be present. Because it never went anywhere. My grandfather's right here. It's right here. It's right here. What mourning? Why attach myself to the loss? I wasn't very close, so it's not that big of a deal even from this perspective. But when I look back upon people that I have lost, or I put myself in those situations or those scenarios where I say, what if? What I truly find, is that part of me that says, and this too. And it's all okay. So this is the nature of dying the undying death. When you experience that falling away of the egoic self, and you have that experience of expansion where you begin to understand the truth of our nature, and you begin to recognize that the presence of being that animates your experience of life is ageless and infinite, that it doesn't even exist in time. The whole idea of birth and life and death exists in time. Those are incremental periods. That's a linear progression. I'm born, I live my life, and I die. I'm born over here on the timeline, I live here on the timeline, and I die over here on the timeline. It's all in time. Time isn't real. There's only ever this moment. Only ever this moment. So again, these are all different ways of just kind of pointing at how we are socialized, normalized, and conditioned to respond to the idea of death as if it has a negative quality. As if it means something. And like any other experience, it only has the weight that we give it. It only has the quality that we assign it. It only has the meaning that we give it. And if we can look at it from the perspective of, well, this is all a beautiful dance of the divine, and we got to dance together for a while, and now I'm going, or you're going, or they're going, woohoo! To embrace that, to embrace the movement of life, which includes movement into death. There's a lovely thing Ram Dass says. He has, I generally try to stay pretty grounded in most of the things I share with people. But he has this lovely story where he has a disembodied being that he takes advice from sometimes that's channeled through a medium. But what the person, I don't hold any of that, but what I would say is that the thing that they say is really wonderful. And it's like, if anybody's concerned about death, tell them it's perfectly safe. If you run into anybody who's worried about it, tell them it's perfectly safe. It's like taking off an old shoe. Now again, it's this idea. It's really interesting because, the work that we have to do is within ourselves. That's the only place any work can be done. It's within our own experience of being. It's the only place. We can't tell the world what to do because the world itself is doing what it's supposed to. All we can do is work on ourselves. But when we experience these things and we draw them in, and we understand them, that's like the first part of it. The next part of it is understanding how it's not just a conceptual self, it's also a conceptual world. And everything that you find to be true within your own experience of being is true in the experience of being for every being, whether they know it or not. What power does death have over you if you see the truth within yourself? And then can you take that truth and see that truth into the space of another? Can you use that as an opportunity to practice letting go? Everything's about letting go. Every lesson that we learn, everything that we're shown, everything that we're taught, it's all meant to force us into that place of letting go, to force us into that place of surrender, surrendering to the mystery. And when we do so, that's when things begin to open. We talked about some of that in the dance of fear, surrender, and insight last week. There are a couple of other things that I have that I want to share as well, but I think I want to go ahead and open it up now for dialogue, because that's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of stuff. So what are some thoughts or some feedback, input, concerns, issues, experiences? Absolutely.
I have two things. First of all, what would you say about tragedy in terms of death? Because I'm totally behind the idea of death as a falling away of the shape of this formless form, that sort of thing. But it gets a little more difficult in the wake of like murder and things like that, So how would you approach that subject specifically versus something like your grandfather, where he was probably old and was...
Oh yeah, he was in his 90s.
Yeah, and it was just his time to go.
It's in that understanding that there is a loving, intelligent awareness that is moving all things in the direction of its own purpose. Now we can call this whatever we want. God, presence, being, consciousness. We can call it whatever we want. It doesn't care what we call it. But it's there, and it's moving all things in the direction of its own purpose. Now what we often, with our judging minds, right, with our judging minds, we often see something occurring. Oh, look, this murder occurred. And of course, the immediate response to this murder occurred is, what a tragedy. But that's a response of a judging mind. It really is. It is to see that movement as a negative. And it isn't to say that that's not a bad thing. I often say we should work within our own experience of being to move all things in the direction of love and kindness to the best of our ability. But it's when we find ourselves in that place where we're judging something as negative, as bad, as wrong, we're losing ourselves in our own idea of the way things should be, the way we think things should be. And what we're not necessarily ready to recognize right away is that in that tragedy is likely a seed of great beauty, great opportunity for other beings. That tragedy serves a purpose. And we have a tendency to get caught on the tragedy instead of seeing the beauty that comes from it. The parent that loses a small child, but then 5 years later has a beautiful awakening and can see the whole beauty of the whole thing. Right? Tragedy giving rise to tremendous beauty and insight. There are many people in this room whose lives have been filled with tragedy, and yet every single one of us can look back upon those tragedies and see how in some way, shape, or form they gave us some small taste of freedom. They allowed us to experience something that we had to deal with. Could not shrink from. As a matter of fact, tragedies are often the things that demand our attention in a way that the 90-year-old grandfather wouldn't. So it's in the understanding that it's all happening to serve its own purpose, and that we don't necessarily need to understand what that purpose is. Our work is to accept things as they are, to practice loving acceptance of the way that things are, and let go of the judging mind, to stand in the center of all experience and say this too. So that would be my answer to that. You said you had two.
Yeah,
you had two.
The second one is just more of a comment. In what you were saying, you mentioned several things that I've just been looking into this past week. They were popping up all over the place because you mentioned The Matrix at one point, and I watched the whole trilogy and the Animatrix within the past week because I caught the very end of the third one on TV, and I haven't watched it since I was 13 maybe, and so I revisited them with some of the concepts that I've brought into my life, and I just got very into that, and then from that, I went to a comic book store by my house and said, I'm feeling kind of in the sci-fi vein of things right now. And he was like, oh, have you checked out Star Trek: The Next Generation? And I was like, yeah, I'll buy a couple of these comics. So those are two. And then you mentioned Ram Dass, and I've been reading Be Here Now this week. And then in this book, you also mentioned Jesus and the suffering that he went through. And I was paging through, but I couldn't find it. There's a part, he says something about how, when Jesus was literally being nailed to the cross, he wasn't saying oh man, that hurts. He was probably just looking at the guy who's doing this and just looking on with compassion and thinking it's the role that he has to fill. It's just what this guy's got to do. Yeah. So it was just cool that you incorporated all those things. Synchronicity. Yeah.
That's exactly right. One of the things that I've often said, amongst the folks that we're all here. We're all here in this space right now to serve the purpose of that divine movement. Each and every one of us is right where we're supposed to be, always. We are always exactly where we're supposed to be, doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And what's beautiful is when those synchronicities arise that go, yep. And it's even more beautiful when you can share them. Everybody can go, oh yeah, I've had that stuff too. And it becomes a reminder for everybody that it's all connected and it's all beautiful. And we don't have to understand it. Every week I come and I speak on things, and my days are sometimes it's I don't know what the hell I'm going to say. But I get in here and I just start talking and I start drawing from everything I was given that week, everything I was shown that week, the nature of my life and my movement in that week. And often it's exactly what is needed. It's often exactly what's needed. The energy of the room actually draws forth that which needs to be said. Because each and every one of us is here contributing in our own way. There's no one really speaking. There's no one really listening. There's just this play within consciousness that's occurring. And we're all just, celebrating in our own way that movement, that experience. So yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. It's lovely. It's great. It's really great.
Talking about the Star Trek thing, I always think of when Picard was with whatever they were, that if one of them knew it, they all knew it. They were all tied into the same.
Board, yeah, the collective.
They were tied into the same mind, and boy, that was one of those things that it's like, if one of us knows, we all know.
Right.
That if you can get your mind from that, it's all there all the time. It's just getting through the crap to it.
You know what? It's interesting you bring up the Borg. So Camille and I were talking about this the other day, because as I'm starting to watch this, she's like, "Oh, just let me know when the Borg show up." But my conversation with her was, isn't it interesting that the Borg in the Star Trek Next Generation series are such a wonderful villain? They inspire so much fear because what they're doing is stripping away your identity and folding you into the collective, where you have no control. There's no more you. And isn't it funny how that's exactly what the whole thing is about? And that the nature of the Borg as this, villainous, okay, it inspires great fear within the ego. And the ego's responding to these characters on the screen. And yet at the very same time, there's the divine consciousness kind of laughing at the whole thing and going, you will be assimilated. It doesn't have to say it quite the same way. But I mean, it's one day you're gonna wake up and realize that you're waking up from you. Ooh. So, Star Trek, I'm watching the series with a different set of eyes now. I haven't watched any of this kind of stuff since I've had my awakening. And so now I'm watching the whole thing and I'm like, wow, that was really deep. That was really cool. I'm like, what am I taking away from this now? I watch everything that way now. I went through a period of time where I didn't watch anything. TV was like, no, I don't want to pollute my mind, which that's a necessary step, I think, when we create that spaciousness within which we can just be fully present with ourselves and not have so much noise, in our lives. But there's a place on the other side of that experience where we can start to draw the experience in a neutral way, where there's nothing can be polluted. There's nothing that can really, I'm still not going to watch horror films and other nonsense like that. But, the basic, kinds of things that we see on television where, a year ago I would have said, well, I don't want to pollute my mind with any of that. Well, there's nothing left to pollute. So, being able to experience these things now has a completely different tone to it, a completely different flavor to it. They're learning experiences. Right? Now, I remember years ago when I would watch television and I would see a character doing something, I'd be like, oh, don't do that, oh. They'd have these uncomfortable moments, and I'd be like, it would create that trigger within me where I'm like, oh yeah, if I was the kid who realized he was naked in the middle of the lunchroom, that'd be horrible. Oh, and I'd start wearing the experience of the characters on the screen. Now I just watch the whole thing as entertainment. And if something does come up, which really doesn't happen anymore, but if something does come up, it's like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that's about. Right? So that curiosity in our own experience, that curiosity that we can bring to the experience, and I wonder what this is about. Oh, I'm having this moment over here. I wonder what that's about. Goes back to the tragedy thing a little bit, right? oh, look, this horrible thing just happened. I wonder what that's about. You know, that whole thing, I often say, you know, when we begin to see our suffering as grace, when we begin to recognize the beauty that's on the other side of suffering, when we begin to accept our suffering, then, you know, and we take joy in our suffering, are we really suffering anymore? Because it's all showing us who and what we are. All of it. Whether it's on the big screen or on this screen. This is a movie playing out. You have people like Swami Vivekananda. I can never pronounce anybody's names correctly, but you have many of these, you know, Indian sages that love to use movie metaphors, right? You know, you go in, you're sitting at the movie theater, you're looking at the screen, you're watching all the characters, but you're not paying attention to the screen. Who sits there in the movie theater with this movie playing and just stares at the screen and goes, that screen is beautiful? We're caught in the movie. It's the same thing here. We're caught in the movie. We're caught in the movement of form. We're caught in the stories. We're caught in the story of. Instead, looking at the screen, seeing the background of awareness within which the movie's being experienced. There was another thing that came up this morning. I was listening to something from Alan Watts. He made a comment, and I was like, ooh, I can shift that. Because I often hear things and it creates something for me where I go, ooh, I can use that and turn it into something else. He was talking about something about a whiteboard or a chalkboard. One of the things that came up was, isn't it interesting how in this process of dying, right? Dying inward, dying the ego death, and letting go. It's like, you know, we have this blackboard, and we've written our story on the blackboard, and we've taken up the whole thing. I mean, that from top to bottom, from this corner to this corner, we have filled up all the space with our story. And then we have a moment, awakening, whatever we want to call it, something that sheds some light. And it's like the whole board is being erased. And then we might be in that place for a little while. And then other things start happening. And so we start writing a new story. And then we get to a point where we're like, yeah, but I'm going to leave this little corner open. Because I'm done. I've gotten the end of it. I don't need to fill up the whole board with this new story. I've got some space here. And then we have some other experience, and we erase the board again. And then we rewrite our story again, and now it's even shorter. And it's even shorter, and even shorter, and even shorter, until we get to that place where there's just one mark on the board. I. It's the only thing that's left on the board. I. And then we erase that. And then all that's left is the board, the background upon which all the characters were written, the background of awareness in which the story of I was being told. These are all different ways of pointing at what it is that happens when we let go, when we create that space.
Bradley, you said something about wearing the experience. One of your comments that you were saying is like, you know, wearing the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how this ties in, but I know, like, for example, like when people have a horrific like death, you know, part of it's like reliving, you know, wearing the experience, you know, reliving the last moment, the act, the feelings of the person at that minute, the loneliness, the despair, you know. And I've done that, not in that aspect, because I haven't had that experience, but in many other aspects. Earlier today, I was talking to somebody who's getting divorced, and she's involved with somebody else, and he's seeing pictures in his head of this person with this other person and all of that, and beating himself up, wearing the experience.
Right.
And I know for myself, I'm trying to figure out, it's like I'm understanding this non-self. So I think understanding this wearing the experience is part of the death of the self, because that is what I've grasped on to not let go of that self.
Right.
And part of it is beating myself up, you know, with like, or I've had experiences where it's like, let me meet more people like that, you know, because I will resolve this situation.
Right.
You know, and what you end up getting is more of the same, and reliving the same. But there's something in the psyche that is leading to, like the answer lies in overcoming. And that just seems almost masochistic, you know what I mean? It's like, let me have some more, and eventually I will get it, and when I get it, I'll know, and I won't do it anymore. How long do you need to do that? What, you know, it's like, how do you shift? I guess that's my question. It's like, how do you go from, it's like knowing that you know, and it's just like stepping away, it's just not knowing and moving on, you know?
So there are two completely paradoxical answers. One is, do everything you can within your own experience to see yourself as you truly are. Practice mindfulness, practice meditation, that love yourself, trust yourself, honor your own journey, all of those things we've been talking about. Do all of that. Incline yourself in the direction of awakening. Make it more valuable than air. And on the other side, you can't do a damn thing. One of those is true. Both of them are true. Neither of them is true. And that's the biggest challenge. That's why, you know, when we talked a couple of weeks ago about the nature of traps, I'm like, man, we can't get ourselves stuck in a place where we think it should be something. I remember watching, it was shortly after my awakening, and I was watching a video segment of Adya Shante, and he was talking to this lady who was giving him an interview. And she asked him something similar. You know, she's like, how do I move into that awakening? What do I have to do in order to awaken? And his answer is, it may never happen for you. This is it. Accept that this is it. That you are not meant to awaken. There's nothing you can do. Here's another thing. That which wants to escape is that which you are also trying to escape from. That part of us that says, I want some other experience, is the part of us that we're trying to get away from. It's so interesting how it plays with itself. It's that part of us that is continually reaching or striving for things to be some other way than the way that they are. And when I talk about how there's no self, there really isn't, there's no self, then the question has to become, within your experience of, but I want to awaken, what can I do? Well, there's no you to do anything, so what is it that you're trying to get done? Where is the I that wants something else? And that's the trick right there. That's the occlusion. That's the speck that's in the eye. Is that just that subtle shift? So it's like, you can't do anything, but you won't know you can't do anything until you've tried everything. It's just like, it's so nonsensical, but at the same time, there's no other way of getting to it. There's no other way of getting to it because it's so... We ourselves as beings are powerless. We are not in control. The I that wants something other than what is the illusory I. But it's going to be there for as long as it needs to be there for it to serve the purpose that it's meant to serve. And some of us have to embrace the very notion that my job is to be a catalyst for the awakening of others, and I myself may never taste the sweet nectar of awakening. And accept that. In accepting that, something of the striving self may let go enough for the awakening to occur. And it's just, who knows? No one really knows. There is no awakened being on this planet that can say, well, if you just do this, it'll all be okay. Anytime we say anything like that, it's all crap. It's all crap. Those words may arise to serve their purpose. They give somebody in the room or in the space a test, something to play with, a hat to try on so that they can see it fail. And when it does fail, they fail into themselves. So to say, do everything you can, and also you can't do anything. It has to, the honest answer has to be inclusive of both sides. Those are never the good answers. They're never, there's always that desire to, but can I just do this one thing? You know, there's another thing that, I can't remember if it's Ram Dass or another teacher, but he said, you know, many of us want to let go, but we don't really want to let go. We want the experience of awakening, but we want it on our terms. I want to know that as I move through the eye of awakening, that I will remain intact. I want to take myself into the experience of awakening. And that's all ego. The ego is what's grabbing hold of the whole thing and saying, but I have to be, and that, it's so hilarious because when you get to the other side of it and you go, oh my gosh, really? That's what it was the whole time? That's what I was holding on to? I mean, I listened to 1,000 people say the same thing. And you get to that place where then you recognize, okay, it could never have been any other way. It could never have been any other way. And that's when the absolute clarity of there's nothing you can do makes itself so completely known. You see why. You see why. In that moment, you see that it just couldn't happen any other way. It had to be that way. You had to be in your own way, in all the ways that you were in your own way, for as long as you needed to be in your own way. That's just the way it is. I wish there was a pill. I'd make a killing. Take this and it'll all go away. Not really, because it's still going to be there, but your relationship with it will be very different. There are pills. We call them psychedelics. But they don't help either. They're a trap and a crutch, so, So I don't know if that's helpful. It's always the same kind of, that same dynamic. It's always that, if there was something that I could offer, I would. But it's already fully there. It's already fully there. It's already everything, the whole thing, it's right here. It's so present. It's so present. That desire to have a conscious experience of it is what prevents the conscious experience of it. Okay, what else?
You know the program that deal with a lot with addictions and all this, and one of the things that it's like for this rebirth to come on, this like new being to just finally take on the surrendering part. We talked last week about surrendering, fear, surrendering, and then the insight. They continuously told us, like, if anybody continuously comes in and out, keeps going out to using it, comes back, goes out, and it's like you're just not getting it. It's like they keep referring to, well, you haven't hit bottom yet. You haven't hit the bottom yet. You're gonna have it. So and nobody really willingly hits bottom.
Right.
It has to come about.
That's right.
So from everything that you're talking about is ego death and all this stuff today, what is the surrendering aspect? Is it always suffering? Like you talked about yours, where you put yourself, the situation that you put yourself in, to actually get into that mode of despair,
Right.
to where it's like, okay,
Yep.
okay, there was no more seeking. And you talked last week about your brother that you were going to go
Right.
out, and he said, well, you're gonna get murdered.
Right.
And it's like 5%, and 95% done. And,
Right, yeah.
and the whole thing, and so what? So I get stabbed, I get whatever, chopped up,
Right.
and, right, you got to the end.
Right, exactly.
So, what is the, does it have to be, like, it's just one technique, total despair, where it's like, okay, there is no more will, except like the will to just give up and die. And then at that point, okay, I'm totally open.
I would say so, there are a couple of different answers, right? One answer is, it's all the divine movement of things, and so there is no answer, it's just the way things are. But, if we bring it down and kind of make it more, pragmatic, practical, within our experience. You know, so in many of the Hindu traditions, and I think in the Buddhist traditions as well, they talk about the highest birth is to be born in a house of yogis. And the reason that's considered the highest birth is because you are being born into a spacious life. You're being born into a spacious life where you are not going to be weighed down by unconsciousness. So the degree of conditioning is very light, very light. So there's like it's like, you know, there's the presence of being with a light smattering of conditioning. And when that being reaches a certain stage of life, there's very little to let go of. They reach a level of life where it's like, oh, with the thinking mind, I can access this and understand this, and I can see how this and this relate to each other, and I can see this is something I'm holding on to, and it just falls away. So that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum, which is more common, right, as we talk about people who have had true awakening experiences, most of them will say that it came out of something very similar to despair or something that was, you know, a raw sense of suffering. What I would say is it's very much like if you took an empty Coke can and you put it into some sort of pressurized container, right? That at some moment when the pressure is strong enough, the can will begin to collapse in on itself. You can watch it. You can watch it bend in on itself and collapse in on itself. It's very much like the mind for most of us, especially in this culture. You know, the mind, there has to be enough pressure. There has to be enough pressure for the ego to begin to collapse in on itself. And when that occurs, the spaciousness that's left, right, the spaciousness that's created as the can collapses, as the ego collapses in on itself, that spaciousness begins to become the viewpoint that we hold. That's the position of the absolute from which we begin to experience life. And so, and you know, in between these two extremes, there's this whole field, a whole sea of individuals who live a comfortable life. And if you live a comfortable life, what need do you have to look deeper? What need do you have? Mm-hmm. I'm happy. I have enough money and enough food and enough things, and you know, I'm surrounded by family and friends, and you know, life is good. Life is good. There's nothing there to shake you. There's no tremor in the ground of being that you're walking upon. And so it's very much like you can say the highest form of birth is to be to be born into a family of yogis. Or you can also say that to be born into a life of tremendous suffering is also a beautiful birth. Any birth that is inclusive of awakening has a tremendous beauty to it. A tremendous beauty to it. And why some awaken and some don't, irrelevant. Why some people are born into this life or that life, irrelevant. The only experience that matters is your experience. The only being that exists in the whole universe is you. The rest of it, I'm just a shape on the screen of your life. Just a momentary blip. To see me as someone is a misguided notion. It's recognizing with beautiful simplicity that it's all just happening. And we don't have to concern ourselves with whether or not we're wearing our suffering, or we're caught in the net of suffering, or whether there's a better way or another way, or is suffering the only way. The only thing that really matters is, what is my experience? How is my experience of being in the world, allowing me to participate in life. I am always the student of this thing called life, always learning from every movement, from every occurrence, from every phenomenon. But at the same time that you are participating, you're also teaching. You're also teaching. If we have someone in our life who is completely unconscious and they're a horrible human being to be with, what a wonderful teacher they are. And just take that to whatever level of subtlety that we need to. Okay, well, maybe I'm not a complete asshole. Maybe I'm just, I got a little bit of it. A little bit. But when I'm playing the role of the asshole, it's serving its purpose. I'm not intentionally going out of my way to be that, right? I often say, right? Move all things in the direction of love and kindness to the best of your ability. But don't use this understanding that all things are always exactly as they should be as a license to be an asshole. Move all things in the direction of love and kindness to the best of your ability. If you fall off your horse, get back on your horse and don't look back. Don't worry about it. It's all good. But know that every single movement plays its own purpose, serves its own purpose. It's just, that person honked at me on the road. Oh, I love you. Thank you for teaching me. Just that. Embracing all of life that way. And when you're angry with yourself, when you have something going on in yourself, when you're caught in yourself, go, thank you. Look inward and say thank you. Say thank you for that part of you that is in resistance, that is attached, that is judgmental. Thank that part of you for being there and exposing itself so that you can use it as a way to free yourself. Yes, ma'am.
When you talked earlier about like the groove, like how we form this new groove, and it's like it's great. And I don't want to say the word groovy, but it feels
That's lovely.
it feels awesome. I love it. Like the blessing and the curse associated with awakening is that even if I have permanent awakening, for me it's more of an intermittent awakening, right? But there are times it's a nice long stretch or whatever. It's not as if I only have to contend then with the awakened and others that are awakened, because like if there's an awakening, 99% of the time there are the unawakened that I have to contend with, right? And that sounds egoic to even say, but it is my experience. And so I guess my question is, it's related to that aspect of well, I guess you've already said it, the having the patience with ourselves when we see, and we feel that stab, right? And we, instead of saying thank you, we're in our stuff.
We're reacting.
Reacting.
Right.
And it's just like my constant work.
Right.
And I suppose that is, because it's a gift, to even be awakened in the first place.
That's right. Yeah.
But to tie back to the death thing, I feel like I still grapple with the disappearance aspect of the flesh form,
Sure.
of the voice, of having recently lost my dad. There's a silence associated with this human being not being in the world.
Sure.
And what I do, but it informs my present life, because I believe in this form. I see it, I feel it, I touch it. Although I agree with everything you're saying, and I miss that form.
Sure. Of course.
And that voice. But like I said, it informs what I do now, where I'm like so aware. I call it ICU meditation.
Mm.
Oh, that sounds good, actually.
Yeah.
Meaning like the ward in the hospital, the ICU.
Right.
But I could look at it a different way.
Uh-huh.
Ah, I like that.
Of course.
I see you. There's someone that I listen to pretty regularly lately on this Insight. If anyone does not have this app, it's called Insight Meditation app. We all know of that, but it's massive and the app is just amazing. And she ends all of her meditations with, I see you.
Mm.
Anyway, when I imagine this person who's my biggest trigger in the ICU connected to tubes,
Mhm.
it's dramatic, but it helps so much when I want her to, when I only want to hurt her with my words
Mm.
because of her hurting me with her words. And fill in the blank, it might be her now, it could be him tomorrow, it could be
Right.
him, whatever. It really, it's like the death meditation that the Buddhists do, and I find it to be helpful. But I am so not where you are, where it's like, okay, and this too, this being's not here anymore. So I guess it's going back to that groove,
Mhm.
and I almost want to ask, like, how the hell long does it take to stop?
Exactly as long as it's supposed to.
To stop, there's this new groove, and I'm yet, and it's kind of right there in the center,
Right.
and yet I'm forming another groove, or I'm back in the old groove. And it's that toggling back and forth. So I don't know. You're not gonna. Yeah, you already answered the question. It takes however long.
And one of the other things is to it does. It takes as long as it needs to, right? But because it's still serving its purpose. It's still serving its purpose. It's to recognize that and it's not meant to be a cold thing by any stretch of the imagination. It's to recognize that those thoughts, those thought forms, however you want to express it, those are echoes of the past. Echoes of the past. They are echoes of the past that resonate very loudly within your experience of being, because there's a degree of attachment associated with what was lost. Right? And so being able to see that degree of attachment to the form and to the presence that was there as something that was ever separate from yourself, and acknowledging that form, that being, that presence was you, is you, and hasn't gone anywhere. It isn't lost. The echo of the past in thought is something that's still being held on to. Now again, it's serving its own purpose. It is serving its own purpose. So there's no need to chase it down. I mean, if there's people, I've heard of people who are like, my mother died 5 years ago, and I still can't leave home, right? I'm like, okay, well, now we've got a whole different dynamic to work with here, But, there is a natural process of letting go within the human experience. There's a natural process of letting go. It's being able to hold that process tenderly and gently with great loving kindness. And to not be like, you can grab it from this place where it's like, wow, it's been this long and I should let go by now. And now it's like, it should be this way. And now we're in a story. It's like, no, it is this way. It is this way. So being able to just acknowledge that if it's there, it's there. If it's not there, it's not there. It's all fine, right? There's no movement in any one particular direction that's better than another direction. It will do what it needs to do. It will do, even if its only purpose right now is just in this moment for it to be shared, right? Who knows how many different ways this particular experience within your presence of being is serving the purpose of the divine, serving the will of the divine. Who knows? What a beautiful thing you've shared that enters into the experience of every being in this space. Right? So it will last as long as it needs to until its purpose has been served.
And it informs, like, also, just a quick note about it, because I live today as present as I can in order, and because I just don't like regret.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah. That's a heavy coat to wear.
But it's a very heavy, and it takes over the moment.
Yes.
And it's the past, and it's, you know, so it informs my present when, you know, I make a life choice to spend the time with my dad to the point where I was with him in the moment, and so I don't have that regret, and so I live my life that way. And when I, you know, with this whole idea of an ICU meditation, I'm just like imagining if they were to just suddenly crash, you know, like there's, you know, fall off the face of the earth, or have that, you know, I think we talked about the airport ride, you know, and offering that to my sister in spite of the daggers that I've gotten from this young girl, and, or woman, feels very girlish. But to say, you know, if you'd like, I'll pick you up from the airport. It's like offering, what is it, the other cheek if you slap me one. And it was a step, and letting go of the results, and because if that plane crashed, or if something suddenly happened to her son or something, that death meditation informs my decisions.
Sure.
And the response wasn't positive in the sense of like, yeah, I love you and I'd love a ride. That would be a stretch. But I know I did, you know, offer. And in that offering, it sounds very benign, but this is, you know, war.
Right, sure.
So, all because of death, you know, so death, I don't grieve my dad, I truly don't. I grieve the loss after my dad as a family.
Right.
And, but I know, you know, that I made that effort. And it's not coming, and I feel that it's not coming from this egoic place. It feels really like, okay, you know, I surrender, here it is, you
Right.
know. I'd like to, it's not just an airport ride, it's like being in the same room and let's try to work this out. I mean, it's an unspoken, or just let's let it go, not even work it out.
Right.
And there was a denial of that. But I'm not cured, you know, I could obsess about it in an hour from now or tomorrow.
Yeah.
But for today, you know, especially having the backdrop be this message you carry, it's a gift, you know, to be able to say, okay, you know,
Yeah.
I hope you survive, and I survive, and it all good. So, anyway, thank you.
It will be what it needs to be. And that's the beauty, right? You know, in the Bhagavad Gita, right? One of the central themes or central messages in the Bhagavad Gita is to take action but surrender outcome.
Yes.
To surrender the expectation of outcome. And so you take an action in the direction of love and kindness. You take an action from that place that does not know fear. And you allow yourself to engage in that moment from the perspective of this too. And you allow it to unfold as it does, playing your role in the process of its unfolding. But not trying to control or trying to expect anything from any other participant in the unfolding. Not even from yourself. Just allow it. No expectation. Being fully here now in this moment is always the easiest way to bring ourselves back into full awareness. This is the only moment that's ever real. And so, you know, when we engage in a moment and it's just, in this moment I'm taking this action, in this moment I'm taking this action. And it's not the action of, I'm here tonight giving a talk and I really hope things go well. It's from the perspective of, here now in this moment is this breath and this work. That's it. Not this moment, this one. And, you know, just being able to be in that place and allow the rest of it to do what it's going to do. Allow the rest of it to do what it's going to do. the more we surrender, the more beautiful our lives become. In Taoist philosophy, it's, and I don't remember the exact quote because I don't memorize too many quotes, but it talks about how how when the Tao is expressed, a foolish man will laugh at it, but a wise man will understand its truth. And the nature of the Tao is all about surrender. It's all about surrender. So a foolish person will laugh at it, and they'll be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. The more I let go, the better things become. I need to be in control, all right? That's the way it works. The more in control I am, the better things are. But the absolute reverse is true. The more we let go, the more beautiful things become. The more tightly we're trying to hold on to it all, the more tied to the expectation of outcome we are. And when we're trying to move the world as if the world is a series of chess pieces that we can manipulate in whatever direction we want to, now we're playing God. Not even worse. You're God pretending to be a person who is pretending to be God. What a lovely play that is. What a lovely game that is. We should televise that.
I want to just say this about the death of a loved one. When my sister was 33, she got sick. And I was in the room with her, and I watched her body shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like watching things change color, and just being so aware of her whole body shutting down.
Yeah.
Why I was in this place at that time, I don't know. But it was like she finished what she came here to do and just moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, I still feel that way. She had that experience and moved on. And it's a soft thing about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now sometimes, if I talk to my stepmother and stuff, we can cry about it.
Sure.
But there's the other part that it was like she just came and did her thing. And I'm really grateful for that I was in a place where I got that somehow.
That's really beautiful.
And, I didn't really think till we were talking, or you were talking, and it was like, oh, yeah, it was just a really, yeah, it was a positive experience in that way.
Yeah.
Not some of the other ways, but yeah.
Right, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, there's a lot of practical, pragmatic, very, stuff that's very weighty and feels very real in terms of dealing with death and dying. There is. Mm-hmm. It's just, just being with it a certain way. Being with it a certain way. I know there's, years ago, I was volunteering with hospice, and they had us there was like a 1-week training. And one of the exercises, and I was playing with the idea of doing it here, but one of the things they had us do is we had, on like 3x5 index cards, we had to write down, what are 5 things that you're holding on to that, if you were coming to your death, are the last 5 things you would let go of, right? And people were writing down their things, and for some people it was an event, for some people it was a person, for some people it was something like dignity, for all these different things. And then, after you made your 5 little index cards, you were told to now what would you be willing to let go of first? What would you be willing to let go of second? What would you be willing to let go of last? Right, that kind of experience. So everyone was doing that. And this is one of those things that I see in hindsight now, where there was a deeper wisdom present in this space at that time that I didn't know, I didn't recognize. But while they were being told what things would you let go of first, and each person was deciding what they were going to let go of first and what they were going to let go of last, I had flipped all of my cards upside down and mixed them up. and I would take one of the cards, and as I was moving it into the middle, where everybody else was putting their discards, I would flip it over and see what I was being forced to let go of in its own due time. And it's interesting how an exercise like that can remind us of how powerless we truly are. Because when we come to that place at the end, we don't get to decide how it ends. You don't get to say, well, I don't want anybody wiping my ass, so that's the last thing I'm going to let go of. That's the first thing that goes. Right? So it's really interesting, right? Thank you for sharing that experience, because it opens up that space of recognizing like this, there's a process. There's a process too. There's a process to go. And that when we're able to engage in the beginning of that process, from the moment of someone going, hey, look, I've got this illness. Oh, goodness, right? That is its own experience. All the way to the point where they're lying in the hospital bed and you're holding their hand. That's the experience. And so the whole thing. Many spiritual teachers work in hospice settings, work with death and dying, because it creates this beautiful opportunity to watch that shift in consciousness occur when somebody recognizes their own, how powerless they truly are. Many people find God on their deathbed, and it's not the God they've been told, lives in Scripture. And that's beautiful, because that moment of absolute clarity, when you're able to go, and just let the whole thing go. If you can do that before the body moves on, wonderful, because even if all you have are 3 minutes of clarity, those 3 minutes will be the most beautiful and profound moments of clarity for the person that is passing and for everyone else in the room. What a gift. What a gift. All right, anything else? We'll wrap up and call it good. Anything else anybody else wants to bring up or share or ask questions?
I just wanted to say this thing about this synchronicity.
Yeah.
That I have experienced this all week long a little bit. It was like, where a name would come up or I do cryptograms, and sometimes there are little quotes that people have said, and there'll be things that we've been talking about. It's like, yeah, there's one, there's one. It's been that way all week. I've always had that. Not always, since I got in enough pain to look for some kind of understanding. They happen to me a lot. But this past week, it's been bam, 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 bam. And it's been really nice to be in that spot again. It's been a long time.
That's beautiful.
I still have tons of crap coming in too, but there is that. It's like, I've got sight of this over here so that I can deal with that or try to get past that.
That's beautiful.
And I thank you very much for being here. It's kind of
I'm not really here. It's all you. It's all you. Well, so next week we'll talk about what is the nature of God. What a lovely conversation. Thank you all so much for coming. I appreciate it. Take care.